began another day. Now, he even calculated his months different. His year starts in the time of year that we call spring. And that is around the time of the Passover. So now, this is the 10th day of the 7th month, according to God's calendar. Go ahead and read on.
It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and you shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Now, the offering, you don't do that anymore, because when Jesus died, that ended the killing of the animals. But then he said, you shall afflict your soul. Afflict your souls, that means to fast. This is the only time of the year that God commands you to fast. The Bible suggests it, but this is the only day of the year that the Lord commands that you fast. So now he said, ye shall afflict your souls. Go ahead and read on.
And you shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God.
Now he said, it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement before you, before the Lord your God. Go ahead and read on.
For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from among his people.
Go ahead.
And whatsoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, the same soul will I destroy from among his people.
The Lord sounds like he's serious about this, doesn't he? Go ahead and read on.
You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and in all your dwellings.
This is what I was saying earlier. Because people want to say when Jesus died, that ended these days. That's not what this said. This said it shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all of your dwellings. Because I even have some people that say, well, Israel, we're not in our land now, so you don't have to keep these days when you're in another person's land. But the Lord said, throughout your generations in all of your dwellings.
Forever.
Go ahead and read on.
It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest.
Now it is a Sabbath. The Bible referred to it is a Sabbath day, but the book referred to it as being a high Sabbath day. You had a weekly Sabbath that we read about, which is the 7th day. Then you have these high Sabbaths. So now this is a Sabbath day. It is a high Sabbath. He said you don't do any work day. Go ahead and read on.
And you shall afflict your soul.
Go ahead.
And the 9th day of the month at even, from even unto even, shall you celebrate your Sabbath.
See, this is what I was saying earlier. God calculated this time from even to even.
That's right.
When you can see a change.
That's right.
So it starts in the 9th day when the sun go down. That begins the 10th day, and it ends when the sun go down on the 10th day. So now we have this Day of Atonement here. Let's go over to 1 John chapter 3, and we'll begin reading at verse 1. Atonement simply means to make amends for some wrong. That's what atonement means, to make amends for some wrong. But in order for amends to be made, there must be compensation. And we're going to show you what the wrong is, and we're going to show you what the compensation is. Let's go to 1 John chapter 3, and we'll begin reading at verse 4. 1 John 3, and we'll read verse 4. 3 and 4. 1 John 3 and verse 4. We're going to get the Bible's definition of sin here. Because everybody have their definition of sin, but we're going to let the Bible give us the definition of sin. Go ahead and read 1 John 3 and 4. Go ahead and read it.
Whosoever committed sin transgressed also the law. For sin is the transgression of the law.
Now that is the definition of sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. If you don't have a law, then you don't have sin.
That's right.
So now, sin is the transgression of the law. Let's go now to James chapter 2, and we'll begin reading at verse 8. James 2 and verse 8. Just so you'll understand what law it is. Because when the Bible talks about the law, there are several laws. There's the animal sacrifice law. Then there's the moral law. And we just read here that sin is the transgression of the law. Let's start reading at James chapter 2. And we'll begin reading at verse 8. 2 and 8. Go ahead and read.
If you fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, ye do well.
Now he's telling you right here, because people want to say, Jesus nailed the law to, You know, just like they say he nailed the high days to the cross, they say he nailed the moral law to the cross as well. Well, this is long after Jesus died on the cross here. And he says here, if you fulfill the royal law, according to the scripture, you do well. Go ahead and read on.
But if you have respect to persons, you commit sin
Go ahead.
and are convinced of the law as transgressors.
Why do you commit sin? Because God has a law that said thou shalt not have respect to persons. So when you transgress that law, you commit sin and you are convicted of the law as a transgressor. Go ahead and read on.
10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all.
Go ahead and read.
For he that saith, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill.
Go ahead.
Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law.
So now he's telling you what law it is that you can't transgress. And if you transgress it, then you commit sin. You know, he took you back to the 10, didn't he?
That's right.
Because he talked about adultery and he said, now if you commit no adultery, but yet if thou kill, thou committest sin. Now, that is the law. If you transgress that law, then you have committed sin. Let's go now to Romans chapter 5, and we'll begin reading at verse 12. Romans 5, we'll pick it up at verse 12. 5 and 12. 5 and 12. So you'll understand the wrong that was committed. Then you'll understand why you needed an atonement. Start reading at Romans 5 and 12. 5 and 12. Okay, go ahead and read.
Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world.
And that one man, that was Adam. By one man sin entered into the world. Go ahead and read.
And death by sin.
And sin brought a penalty, and the penalty that it brought was death. Go ahead and read on.
So death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned.
Now, that tells us that everybody is under the death sentence. Because sin, the wages of sin is death. And the book says everybody is sin.
Right.
That means that everybody is under the death sentence, right? Let's go now to Leviticus chapter 17. That is the wrong. And we're going to show you what it takes to compensate for that wrong. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 17, and we'll begin reading at verse 10. This is how we do it here. You know, we go old and new, here a little, there a little, line up on line, precept up on precept, so that everybody can get some understanding of what the Bible is telling us here. So now the wrong, that's sin. That's right. And everybody is guilty. We just read that. Everybody is guilty of sin. Let's see what it takes to make an atonement for sin. Because atonement is necessary. Let's start reading at Leviticus chapter 17, and we'll begin reading at verse 10. 17 and 10. Okay, brother, go ahead and read.
And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or the strangers that sojourn among you.
So, you know, this wasn't just for the house of Israel. It was for the stranger as well. Everything that applied to Israel, it applied to the stranger as well. Whatever stranger got to do to get salvation, Israel have to do the same thing. Whatever get Israel cut off will get the stranger cut off as well. God has one agenda for everybody. Because the way some people teach it, as though God had two agendas. One for the stranger and the other one for Israel. They tell you that Israel is under the law and the stranger is under grace. And that never made any sense to me. Because what you are saying is, if you're an Israelite, you can't sin. If you break the law, you're in trouble. But a Gentile, because he happened to be born a Gentile, he can break the law and God is not going to punish him for it. That makes no sense at all. We just read God said don't be a respecter of persons, right?
Right?
Well, that's being a respecter of persons, isn't it?
That's right.
So now, what applied to Israel, it applied to the stranger as well. Go ahead and continue reading.
That eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from among his people.
Go ahead and read.
For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your soul.
See what it is that makes the atonement? It is the blood that makes the atonement. Right. And that did not change when you got to the New Testament, and we are going to read that in just a minute here. Now he said, I've given you the blood for the atonement. Go ahead and read on.
For it is the blood that maketh atonement for the soul.
See what